Primaris Space Marines have been a touchy issue among Warhammer fans from their very announcement. Some fans hate the idea, others found the idea interesting, and even found justification for them in the fluff. No matter where you land on the side of if Primaris Marines do, or do not, belong in the 41st millennium, an interesting question still exists. Should Guilliman use the Traitor Primaris Marines? Archmagos Dominus Bellisarius Cawl was tasked by Rubute Guilliman at the end of the Horus Heresy with creating the next generation of Space Marines, a generation of new warriors who would be up to the task of meeting the traitor Astartes, swollen with the power of the warp, on equal footing. Upon Guilliman's resurrection, he discovered that Cawl had also created thousands of Primaris Marines from the Traitor Legion's Primarch's genetic material, not just the loyalist sons of the Emperor. Ultimately, Guilliman refused Call's request to use these Primaris Marines, but Rubute stopped short of calling for their destruction. So this begs the question: should Guilliman make use of the Primaris Marines made from the genetic material of the Traitor Primarchs like Cawl obviously wants? Adam, we'll start with you.
Okay, so for those that have read the book, I think that they should use the geneseed from the Traitor Legions in addition to because they also mention, if you've read the book, they also mention the 2nd and the 11th Legions, which are the missing ones. So we assume the assumption is that they kept geneseed from each legion as the Great Crusade progressed, which is probably how they have them. We don't know exactly when the project started. I believe Guilliman had him do it, but some people are saying, I have to double check, but I think they said that the Emperor had him do them because, as we all know, if you don't know, the Primaris are more or less replacing the Firstborn Marines, just like the Firstborn Marines replaced the Thunder Warriors. I think it comes down to, like in the excerpt, it comes down to like, does the apple fall far from the tree? Are the kids always going to be just like their parent? So if their parents rebel, are their kids going to? Are the Marines going to? Guilliman obviously thinks so. Cawl does not. His is more of like the sins of the father are not the sins of the son, so to speak. And I kind of agree with that. You know, a lot of times everybody makes the comments, "Oh, that your kid is just like you or just like your wife." But as they get older, you know, they develop their own personality and idiosyncrasies and traits and things like that. Now, some might be similar. Same with the Primaris. They might be similar to their Primarchs, but that doesn't mean they're going to be exactly like their Primarch. And we've already seen that during the Horus Heresy itself, when certain legionnaires did not turn traitor. They remained loyal and became the Black Shields. And at the same time, there are loyal Marines that became traitor, Dark Angels. So that just because a Primarch turned traitor or didn't turn traitor doesn't mean their legionnaires won't. And I think the same is here. And even as it's mentioned in the book, over the centuries, Space Marines have still turned renegade or traitor one way or another. There's plenty of stories in the fluff as to that happening. So I don't see why you can't why not take the chance and get these guys out there to help with reclaiming what was lost. You can easily put some type of control on them if you're really that nervous about it, because I know I know they have the technology to do something like that. And the other thing is, I think the other thing is we would know something about the 2nd and 11th Legions, although I don't know if Games Workshop would want to do that. So, but that's where I think I stand right now with it.
Okay, Tom, you're up.
So to add on to the history of the Primaris project, we first actually get introduced to it in one of the Siege of Terra books, The Sons of the Selenar. When Nakona, I think his name is Nakona. Yeah, Nakona Shadowstep. I'm probably getting his last name wrong. I'll look it up. But he, among the other of the Shattered Legions, finally make it back to Terra. But rather than going to the defense, they realize they need to go to Luna to protect the cloning facilities and the last of the Selenar. And in the process of that, it is discovered that the project that they are saving unwittingly is not some Primarch gene seed, but a box that kind of has literally just is floating in space, and it turns and it says Primaris on it. And from, I think, the rest of the lore, while the Emperor may have commissioned the project, Guilliman, when he was Lord Guilliman, basically gave Cawl the go ahead and start doing it. And then, of course, Guilliman was poisoned by Fulgrim, and then 10,000 years later or so. And I'm also of the understanding that the Traitor Legions should be used. Adam brings up some really great points. I think in addition to, Cawl himself says something interesting in that conversation, or the Cawl inferior, actually, the totally not AI robot that is Cawl with Guilliman on his flagship. And he says that it's part of the Emperor's original vision. And there are lots of different times where the legions are talked about as components of a whole, filling the gap where others may fall short, and we see this multiple times in the books where the Primarchs either love or lament their own particular roles as either siege breakers or defenders, or Russ is often called the executioner of the Emperor. Guilliman is the statesman. I mean, they all typically have these kind of greater roles to play. And while you could debate about the Emperor's vision, it seems that to only allow for the loyal legions to continue, that in and of itself is kind of a shortening or a lack of his entire original intent. By allowing for the other Traitor Primarch legions, to become Primaris and to then, move forward, it allows for a variety of different traits and genetics to enter into the fore. And like Adam said, you can introduce these controls. You can educate them as to the history and warn them that they're on thin ice. And, being loyal or not from originally doesn't even matter. What's interesting, too, is that in that same conversation, the Cawl inferior, when Guilliman says, no, we're not going to do it, the Cawl inferior essentially says, well, should we destroy them? And Guilliman basically just doesn't say yes or no. He just kind of said, ever the resourceful tactician kind of says, well, just in case, let's keep him in the back pocket. And so I think that kind of betrays his own thoughts on it too, as to he's still kind of, very fresh into the 41st millennium, he remembers very vividly the scars of the heresy. But I think seeing what he has, he's hesitant to throw away that weapon. In the Guilliman short story too, he employs the Destroyer Squad, which he almost never does, and other Ultramarines kind of treat them as like horrors or horrible legionnaires because of the absolute devastation of the weapons they carry, and question why Guilliman even allows such horrible things to exist even during the Crusades. And it becomes very clear that while Guilliman, comes off as this noble, Primarch with these kind words, he will absolutely pull the nuclear option if he needs to. And so I think even he himself kind of betrays himself and says, yes, I think we're going to need them potentially. He won't even get rid of them. If he truly didn't think that they should ever be used, he would have ordered them to be destroyed.
Okay. Danny, you're up.
So from my view, I think it's important to note in what Adam and Tom were talking about, though, is that yes, there were individuals within Traitor Legions that did not fall, and there were individuals within Loyalist Legions that did fall. But the thing is, if you look at the ratios, it was very much the exception to the rules, right? The vast majority followed their Primarch. The vast majority seemed to follow their genetic programming. Primarch Project was always talked about in Space Marines as this idea of gene editing and gene magic. It's a very often Space Marines are talked about in very almost deterministic kind of viewpoint of they are built to be something. It is inherent within them. And if there's a flaw in the design, it will eventually show itself. And that flaw comes from the plan, the process, and, individual ability or things like that might matter to some extent, but that, overall, when you're looking at the group as a whole, that there's going to be a much higher, kind of statistical likelihood of certain things happening. So I don't think it's actually that smart to bring out all the Traitor Legions their gene seed, because there are, just like with the Blood Angels, actually there are flaws in their gene seed, right? Like World Eaters, even before Angron, and when they were the the Emperor's Hounds or
Warhounds.
The Warhounds, that they were extremely violent, that they were they excelled at close quarter combat, right? That like all of the legions have these inbuilt kind of genetic dispositions to certain styles of warfare, to certain methodologies and ideologies. And so I think from the world that the Games Workshop has created, that these Traitor Legions, that would all of them go bad? No, but would enough of them go bad to where there's no net gain, right? That's maybe even a net negative, because if you have like we have 10,000 new Primaris. But even if 3,000 or 4,000 of them end up going bad because of a faulty gene seed or flaws in the gene seed from the Primarchs themselves, that can be huge, especially if all of a sudden they're like, helping sway the battle against chaos, and then you have like a third or even a fourth of your force turn against you in mid battle, and all of a sudden you're flanked and caught between two opposing forces. Like, that's catastrophic, right? And so I think that it's the risk is not the need, which in 40K the need is always dire. It's always 11:59 to midnight. That's always been kind of the world of it. But I think that, like, actually thinking about it and sitting down of like, no, I don't think it's a smart idea, because I think those Traitor Legions, I mean, what are you going to do with, like, again, I go back to like the Night Lords, like, are you just going to let them be Space Batman too? Right. Like, and that's not going to go to chaos, right? That's not going to become a problem, I'm sure. Same with like the, Mortyrion's children, right? Like the Death Company, they're not going to be like, hey, our Primarch's alive, the guy who gave us our genetic seed. Oh, he's bad. We won't listen to him. Right. Like, so I just think in general, it's too big of a risk. And I think Guilliman knows that it's just there, unless it's completely dire, like Abaddon or Tyranids or, Gaskull are like directly threatening Terra, right? And are landing troops on Terra. I don't see a reason why he would dethaw them, knowing just the likelihood that they will fall, or they will become renegades, if not truly to chaos, if they just become their own, like, cool, we're just going to make our own empire. Awesome.
All right, so I have thoughts. One of which is, like recognizes like, even in the Warhammer universe. So even if you were able to tell a lie well enough to those Primaris Marines that they're not who they think they are, they're going to find out. Because, like I said, like recognizes like. Plus, one of the legions you're talking about is the Legion of Lies. I mean, if you think that the Alpha Legionnaires aren't going to figure it out, then you haven't been paying attention to the fluff, because they're going to figure that out real fast. So I think that's my primary problem with this, and maybe that's where Guilliman's coming from too, which is, I mean, it is more likely than not, if they're going to try to keep their lineage from them, obviously, right? And then that is unlikely to work. I mean, I suppose there is, according to some people, reference to that in the Horus Heresy, where the Lost Legions were, at least in one case, assumed by the Ultramarines, right? Or assimilated by the Ultramarines or something. But that's not clear how that happened. Like, was there mind wiping involved? Who knows, right? Because, like, we don't know. But I feel like it'd be very difficult for the Imperium to keep that from those other Primaris Marines. Another thing is, which is kind of going off on a tangent a little bit, but I think it's relevant to this conversation, because if you read Deliverance Lost in the Horus Heresy series, Corax basically creates Primaris Marines. Right? Like he gets the gene seed technology from his father. His father tells him how to go through the maze. He goes through the maze, gets the technology, goes back to their home planet, which I don't remember what its name is. Is the name of the planet Deliverance? Right, it is. No, I think it is, yeah. So he goes back to the home planet, and he and his chief apothecary and a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus, who at the time was not called the Adeptus Mechanicus, but they're just the Mechanicus, right? The Mechanicum. They went and they created basically better Space Marines. Like they used his gene seed and the other gene seeds of the other Primarchs, and they created better, bigger, faster, quicker to basically like mature Space Marines, which is basically just Primaris, right? So those ones happened, and then that failed because of chaos, right? The Alpha Legion got in there and corrupted it and caused bad things to happen. Basically, they created them into like demon spawn or whatever. They like became possessed Marines, kind of without the possession. They were just like monsters. So I think that there's two things going on there. One, it's going to be really hard to keep it secret from these Primaris Marines who they actually are, if in fact they try to keep it secret. And if they don't, well, like Danny said, there's going to be a good number of them who want to just follow their master who's alive, since most of those masters are alive. Why follow this Primarch? He's not ours. Our Primarch is alive. And then the other problem is it's already been shown that Primaris is corruptible. Like, it's just as corruptible as anybody else, and it can happen whether you want it to or not. Tom?
So I have an addendum to what you said and then a follow-up question. The addendum being, we actually, in the short story where Rogel Dorn and Malkador speak, when he's preparing the defenses for Terra, he discovers the secret room with these sigils he seems to recognize, and one of them is the logo for, I think it's this 11th Legion. And Malkador kind of says, well, you found the skeleton in the closet. And it's learned that what you said is actually what happened. It's a mind wipe. And the remaining, the legionnaires whom they believed could be spared were subsumed into the Imperial Fists and to the Ultramarines, which is why of all of the Space Marine legions, those are the two that had the most first founding chapters. They're also the ones that had the largest numbers at the time of the heresy.
No, Wordbearers and Ultramarines. The Imperial Fists were large also, but the two largest were Ultramarines and Wordbearers.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
But the two largest loyalists are going to be Ultramarines and Imperial Fists.
Right. Did not know that. So that was point. But point two is, and I think this is what Adam was referring to when I was thinking of why. I mean, if we've talked in a separate episode about the Emperor lying and whether or not that was a good idea or not, wouldn't Guilliman maybe turn the other side of the coin and potentially resurrect these legions and say, oh, hey, your dads were bad. Don't be bad. Be good. Like, why don't you think that would be a viable option?
I feel like that'd be a viable option as a last resort. Like, I think Danny's saying, like, Terra is threatened. You have no other options. Open up this vault, get these 100,000 dudes out here, and be like, hey, your fathers were terrible. You can make up for it by defending Terra and the Emperor himself. Go. Because at that point, it's like basically they have very little chance to become corrupted. They have very little chance to be turned. And at the end of it, the Custodes can just handle them if they need to. Like, hey, if they don't die in the process, you can side them down because the Custodes clearly don't have a problem with that. Thunder Warriors.
I mean, I think actually when Tom mentions that, the members of the 2nd and 11th were mind wiped and put into different, Imperial Fists and Ultramarines, it's actually funny that you put that in context to Cawl and his counter to Guilliman of being like, well, some of your own gene seed have gone renegade. And it's like, where's that gene seed from? Is it actually his? Because not all Ultramarines or Imperial Fists are their gene seeds, right? So again, and the way that's, again, especially Space Marines, and I think in general, the game is, the world is so, like you are made this way, you are, we have engineered you this way, you were born this way. It's very deterministic. And so it could very much still be one of those things of, you let them out of the vaults and maybe they're going to behave for a short amount of time until eventually, what is inbuilt within them manifests, right? And that you can't control that anymore. So I think it's actually really funny to put that information in context with Call's reply. And if Guilliman would have even acknowledged it, have been like, well, now that you mention it, they were adopted.
I can totally imagine Guilliman being like that too. Being like, can you prove they were mine? Because you know what? Some of them were already traitors. And that wasn't my fault.
I wasn't here when that happened, so I don't believe it. Or it doesn't apply to me.
I want a paternity test. Get me on Jerry.
Adam, do you have further thoughts?
As mentioned before, I think I don't think not telling them the truth would backfire no matter what. And I think they would have to go with like just laying it out there as this is how it is. This is what happened. And they basically have to make a choice. Now, what they do if they make the wrong choice is most likely to terminate them, as that would be very Imperium. But I mean, that's the choice they have. Now they could lie and say they're okay with it. But like I said, if anyone played Rogue Trader or second edition 40K, you know, there are ways of controlling people, whether it was the bombs in the neck type of deal or things like that. So I don't, if they're that desperate with the whole galaxy split in half because of chaos, I mean, you got to use what you got, no matter the cost. I mean, like I said, there's ways to put preventative measures in order to take care of it in case something happens. They could have done that from the beginning. If they did that, maybe they wouldn't have other renegade chapters like, you know, Astral Claws and things like that turn. But at the time, I guess they just thought the Space Marines were it. And I think that I still think it would help. I think maybe there'll come a time where Games Workshop will have that, you know, last stand on Terra, and then Guilliman decides to activate the quote unquote reserves. But I also think they probably won't do it because then they'd have to reveal what the 11th and the 2nd Legions are, or some hint of them. They don't really talk about them after they talk about assimilation into the Ultramarines. And like Tom said, they're mind wiped. You can almost do the same thing here with all the Legionnaires that became Primaris. Just mind wipe them. But maybe Guilliman just doesn't want to risk it. But oh well, decision's been made, even though I think it's the wrong one.
Tom?
You know, I could see them doing a last stand activation, and when he gives the order, you know, someone says, all of them, sir, and he says, well, not the 2nd and 11th. They were too bad, and keep that kind of mantra of they're so bad that we can't even really talk about them. But ultimately, I don't know. I think it would, I mean, from a story perspective, I think it would be really fascinating to see what it would look like to have a legion of descended traitors and what that would mean and the eternal conflicts and the potential stories that could come out of that. I think would really be cool. Plus, then it would completely validate my Primaris Alpha Marine army. So,
yeah, I definitely think that it would be a unique storyline. I don't know if they ever get the story advanced to that point. Like, I'm not one of those people who believes that GW will do
40K end times.
Yeah, I don't believe GW is going to do 40K end times the way they did with Fantasy, where they just blew everything up and that was that. And hey, we'll restart the story somehow. I think that it's too reliant on the way it already is. You know what I mean? The way it's already set up. I could see them doing a battle for Terra where the Emperor somehow reawakens and comes back and leads the charge against chaos across the field. But like, I also don't see them doing that too. And so in that framework, I don't think they will reawaken these Traitor Primaris all at once. It would be really interesting if they tried like one or two to see what happens. And then like one or two of them. And then like those one or two, one goes really bad and one stays. And like what that storyline would look like, right? Like say the Death Guard go and they like totally turn to Mortarion and are like, awesome. And Mortarion like comes to them is like, come to me, children. Papa Nurgle needs you. and like they all turn, right? Because Papa Nurgle's like the nice, comforting god of the four, which is weird, but he kind of is. And then it would be really funny if the other one that doesn't turn is like World Eaters, where they're like, that dude's nuts. There's no way we're going to follow Angron. He's crazy, right? So that would be interesting to do. I just don't know if they'd ever do that. And also, like, lore-wise, I don't know if it makes a lot of sense, lore-wise, to have those legions wake up. I think it's more like the 2nd and 11th, where, like, yeah, they're there. They're a thing. They did exist.
Right.
And then finally, my last issue with the mind wipe idea, I would assume that mind wiping 100,000 Astartes would probably require either the Emperor or Malkador. Because the only way to mind wipe would be psychically in this universe, right? Like, I'm sure there's not a biotransference mind wipe machine that they like came across a Necron machine and then changed it into like a mind wipe machine somehow, like because of the Void Dragon. Like, I doubt any of that stuff occurred. It probably was like the Emperor, instead of forcing the word bearers to kneel, mind wipes everybody in the 11th Legion. Is like, you're all Ultramarines now. That guy's your dad. Right. And I'm his dad.
Well,
okay, everybody got it? And like move on. Like, it's going to take a massive psyker, and I don't think one of those exists except for Magnus.
Right. But I think in the older fluff, I don't know about now because they really don't talk about it. Mind wiping Space Marines was common, especially when they came into contact with demons. They would kill Imperial Guardsmen because they're just regular guys. But the Space Marines were so valuable that instead of killing them, they would just mind wipe them. So in older fluff, it could be done.
Yeah, that's even really old fluff, though. That's like 3rd edition.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's from 3rd edition that we still have. So, I mean, in theory, they could bring it back, I guess, for whatever. They can create like a whole department that's all they do. The mind wipe department. Or they can just get the little red thing like in Men in Black. Just do that. Look at this red light, please.
Can you look here for a minute? You won't remember anything. What? Blink.
But yeah, I think it's just wishful thinking, I think, on my part.
I mean, it definitely would be a compelling storyline. I already think it's a very compelling storyline. Like, the fact that they managed to link this stuff from the Horus Heresy with Deliverance Lost to, Guilliman giving Cawl this Sancprimus Portum.
Yeah.
Sancprimus Portum. So that he could, like, man, that is quite, when you're reading it in your head, that's totally different than starting to say it out loud.
Yeah.
Giving him that thing so that he could do like this 10,000 year quest to like make these new Space Marines, which is something like his brother did in like a couple of days.
Yeah.
It's a really cool storyline. I just don't know where they'd go with the Primaris.
I don't know. If you listen to some of the fluff or the Space Marine chapter that was in the White Dwarf, Sons of the Phoenix, some people theorize that that's a Emperor's Children geneseed that Cawl kind of made on the side. That's why it's Sons of the Phoenix. And the colors are purple and white.
But Phoenician and Phoenix aren't the same. The Phoenician comes from literally the Phoenicians. Like, that's right. The root of that. And that doesn't have anything to do with a Phoenix.
I don't know. It's the Imperium. What do we know?
Yeah, it's also called High Gothic, not Latin to Greek to Romance languages. Sir.
Excuse you, Phoenician was its own alphabet, and it predates Latin and Greek.
I know that.
And was,
I was just testing you.
I think we should call
the
it
history
that.
teacher on history.
What do you think? I'm some Hittite? Come on.
Ooh, you were at the fall of Ugarit. I bet the Emperor was.
Yes.
Question is, was the Emperor a Sea People or was he a Hittite?
I think he was Hammurabi.
It's another discussion.
That would be a good one, actually. If you're listening to this, let us know if you'd like us to discuss who from history we think the Emperor was. Because I got a list.
I do too.
And I think it'd be a good discussion. So if you're interested in that, let us know. Otherwise, Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our dive into should Primaris traders be allowed out of their stasis.